Information can be found on our district website for our district YouTube channel. The meeting is now called to order. It is May 17th, 2023, and the time is 6:32 p.m. Our mission is to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage, inspire, educate, prepare, and empower all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. Zach, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and then can you please call roll?
Okay. Following board members are present at the District Administration Office. Shannon Haas,
Here.
Monica Shigera-Swartz,
Here.
Heather Weems,
Here.
Scott Andresen,
Here.
Natalie Copeland,
Here.
Al Dahlgren,
Here.
Zach Dorholt is here. The following cabinet members and staff are present at the District Administration Office. Superintendent Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education Kay Nelson, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education Dr. Mike Rivard, Director of Innovation and Instructional Technology Ryan Cox, Executive Director of Operations Gary Ganji, Media Technicians Paul Novak and Gordy Scott, Custodian on site Steve Hain. The following cabinet members and staff are virtually present. Director of Community Engagement and Communications, Tammy DeLand, Executive Director of Community Education, Adam Holm, Executive Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations, Tracy Flynn Bowe, Director of Equity Services, Ian Omar, Executive Director of Research Assessments and Enrollment, Don Roper, Executive Assistant, Jan McGuire.
Thank you. Next, I'm looking for a motion to approve tonight's Board of Education meeting agenda.
So move.
And do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Scott, a second by Heather. Zach, can you please call roll?
Scott Andresen,
Yes.
Natalie Copeland, Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Zach Dorholtz, yes. Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Monica Shigera-Swartz. And Heather Weems.
Yes.
Thank you. Then we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board adopts routinely without debate. Any single member may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. We have item A, approval of minutes from April 5th, 2023 and April 19th, 2023. Item B, approval of bills and other financial transactions in the grand total amount of $2,705,353.09. Item C, approval of personnel staff changes. Item D, acceptance of grant awards and donations. Item E, Apollo HVAC project change orders totaling $24,767.62. Item F, Board Policy 101, third reading for legal status of the district, school district as revised, third reading. Item G, Board Policy 103, expression of concerns, complaints, conflicts about District 742 employees as revised, third reading. Item H, Board Policy 203.2, order of the regular school board meeting, minor change. And item I, Board Policy 209, Code of Ethics, minor change. At this time, does any board member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, then I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
So
moved.
move. Oh, second.
Okay, a motion by Natalie, a second by Scott. Thanks.
Natalie Copeland,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Zach Dorholtz, yes. Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Monica Shigera-Swartz,
Yes.
Heather Weems,
Yes.
Scott Andresen.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Moving on to our information items. First one of two tonight, we have Imagine 742, a student-led discussion on parking fees presented by Ryan Cox, Director of Innovation and Instructional Technology. And he'll be introducing
All right, let's try this again. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. I'm going to have the folks I'm presenting with introduce themselves and just give a brief one sentence about kind of who they are and why they're here.
He's good. I'm Katie Herbold. I'm an innovation coach for the district.
I'm Bennett Wachnick, a junior at Apollo High School.
So we are here tonight to share with you our first approach at the Imagine 742 program. Katie will be explaining the process that went through to get us to this point. But we're here to talk about this, our go at this with parking permits. So generally speaking, the Imagine 742 program that Katie will outline is really rooted in our strategic plan. You take a look at some of the key ideas here. Objective 1.1 talks about fostering a safe and welcoming school climate which expands also opportunities for student voice. And then looking at Objective 3, which is around innovation. So that's kind of the grounding parts for our school district where this process began. This is a quote that we've used quite a bit throughout this process, and the quote originates from this idea that Albert Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. So often what we do is we run across challenges, or as Bennett will talk about, pain points, and then we jump to solutions, and we don't really think deeply about the causes and the foundations and the roots of that problem. You know, what is it that's causing those problems? Who's it impacting? How is it impacting the system, the culture, the whatever? And so we really spent a lot of time, which we'll outline for you, that 55-minute part of this whole process until we get to the final result, which we're bringing for an information item tonight.
So we started by asking our students in our online platform for some ideas that they had to improve their school experience. We had a lot of students submit ideas. Students were able to upvote each other's, so that's like giving a thumbs up. So we had many students reading each other's ideas and upvoting those. We then were able to take ideas that were similar and put them together, and we gave students tokens, virtual tokens, that they could invest in the ideas that they felt were most important to them. So they could, I believe it was 5, they could invest all 5 on one idea, or they could split them up and put them on multiple ideas. So from that whole process, the idea that was the most highly invested in was parking permits. And some of the things that students had said about parking permits were about the expense, not knowing where the money goes, and being a public parking area. So students were then, who contributed to that idea, either upvoting, putting tokens on, or even giving the idea, were all invited to be a part of our first Imagine 742 Summit. And we had a group of students that came in and worked with us for an entire day on problem solving around parking permits. And what you're going to hear now are the results of their work. Ryan, you can go, yep. So one of the first things they started talking about were the parking lots at both Apollo and Tech. We just had the Apollo parking lot up, and this is the Tech parking lot. Students talked a little bit about some of the stressors of parking and some of the things that they notice about the parking process and the parking permit process. You can go on to the next one. We then had David Cooney from Finance come and talk to students about where the money from those parking passes goes and what it's used for, which was new knowledge to all of the students in the room, and they really appreciated that. We then had the students start exploring what we call pain points. So something that might be getting in the way of them having success, and to start problem solving those. So I like to think of them as like little bottlenecks. So areas where they were getting hung up or caught in the whole process of parking and the parking permit. And students then took their pain points and put them on a Google Jamboard, which is like a digital bulletin board. For each school, they were then sorting them from top to bottom, the most pain, the least pain. And then the two groups got together from Tech and Apollo and put those ideas together in common ground between the two buildings. And Bennett's going to talk about what those main pain points were.
Yes, so after we had discussed separately as Tech and Apollo, we then came together and worked to create our 3 pain points that we thought were of the most importance to address. These 3 were the lack of information around how payments are used, the high cost at the beginning of the school year, and finally, the lack of enforcement of the current parking pass system. It was the second one, the high cost. This one, after we discussed with business services just how expensive it is to maintain a parking lot with the maintenance and snow removal, that we were focused mostly on distribution of the cost to help spread that out, because we were then aware of just how much it really costs to do all of that.
Once students heard those costs, they thought a lot about being fiscally conservative and thinking about ways to use that money. They also talked about, I thought it was interesting, kind of as being a parent, they talked about the high costs at the beginning of the school year and thinking about all the things that families have to buy at the beginning of the year. So I thought that was really a good way of thinking about people outside of their own kind of bubbles. We next went from these pain points. We gave students this sentence frame to make a point of view statement. This allows them to kind of organize their thoughts. And we use these a lot in our language arts classes just to give us students kind of a structure for a sentence and organization of those thoughts. So this was the sentence stem we gave them, and Bennett's going to share the ones that his group came up with.
Yes, so after we discussed and got to those pain points, we then shifted and then refined even more what we thought were the issues into these 3 point of view statements. That 1, District 742 needs a way to increase transparency around funding because it could help sell more passes and make the students feel more justified. That District 742 needs a way to have students pay the parking pass in trimester installments because it would help the low-income households of the district. And finally, District 742 needs a way to enforce the parking passes because there's no reason for the students to pay when there is no enforcement of the system. And with these 3 statements, these were directly what the students came up with. These were taken from the notebook we were writing in, and again, based directly on the pain points. And we were, at this point, still focused on distribution of the cost. We were not aware of any possibility that the price could be lowered. So we were focused on spreading the cost out throughout the year of what we now have the opportunity of lowering the cost.
The students did a really good job of thinking about people outside of themselves, the adults around them and the other families that might not have been represented. And I think that's pretty evident here. They did a great job with that. So after we talked about pain points and point of view statements, the slide Ryan showed earlier, talking about the problem and then moving on to the solution. The how might we is the solution phase. So we start to go from that problem-based thinking to solution-based thinking and reframe those pain points as opportunities. So how might we make parking passes easier on families? And so Bennett's going to talk about a couple of the ideas that they had identified, which he kind of already did too, but.
Yeah, it was, at this point, it kind of relates back to that original quote from Albert Einstein that we had spent all of the time up until now really focusing on the problems presented, trying to get all possible angles and find every detail that needs to be addressed rather than immediately jumping to the solution. Yeah, the solutions we had were kind of the dream of lowering the fee. We weren't sure if that was a possibility, so that's where we came with the idea of distributing the cost.
So we are here tonight to share the administration's recommendation for parking permits for the 23-24 school year and beyond. We broke this down into 6 key points, which is $10 per vehicle for Apollo, including McKinley and also tech students. The permit would be valid through the life of the vehicle or graduation. So if you drive the same car from your first year there to your second year, it would just be that one time, still that $10 payment. Not payment per year, but one time. The permit would be a sticker placed in the back driver's side window that would increase efficiency for review of the parking permits as people walk the lot. Of course, people may still pull through from time to time, but we know that in most cases that's not what happens, and so it'll be easier for the people to just walk the lot and see the stickers on either side. The permit is tied to the student ID, which is then tied to the vehicle. And so that would actually keep that tracked within Skyward. It also would better ensure who that car and that sticker belongs to. We would work with principals to see how we can increase enforcement within the parking lots themselves. And then finally, if you have a new car for the next school year, then the new sticker for that year would just be $5. So, and again, that sticker would then be relevant for the life of that car or graduation. The next step then that we're looking at is the permit sticker itself. We talked about using a crush logo because that's just become much more of a universal across district. It doesn't matter if a student stays at Tech, transfers to McKinley, transfers to Apollo, or anywhere in between there. That way it's not a new sticker that's got a Tech logo at Apollo or McKinley, or Apollo sticker that's at the other two buildings. And so we would start with a crush logo. The fun part we're going to do as well is involve the students like Bennett to work with our communications team to actually design the sticker. We'll look at communications to do like a ballpark rough draft kind of idea, and then have the kids come in and give contributions and suggestions and feedback of how that might look and feel different to represent the students themselves. So that will be coming up here very soon, hopefully. And then just a short reflection of the process. Just going to double check my volume real quick. Yep, should be good. So this is a portion of the innovation video that was put out by the communications team. I want to say maybe a month ago, somewhere in that area. And this is the portion of the Imagine 742 work.
I personally think it's a good idea to get everyone together just because everyone has different opinions in their own right. It's just dependent on schools and bias of people.
I really appreciate how they're working together to try to help the students with what they're wanting. I'm hoping that we can each get what works out together.
It's kind of nice to have my voice heard because I can kind of give my opinion and just take a look at the future.
I think that this really shows the students that innovation isn't just about technology and building things. It's about learning, creating new ideas, showing the students how the district makes decisions. All their processes for that is replicated on a smaller scale here.
742 together.
742 together.
742 together.
Bennett, do you want to give just a few thoughts about
I
what?
personally think it's a
Sorry
good
about
idea to get everyone together just because everyone has different opinions.
Let's run it again. There we go. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so like I said in the video, it really kind of opened my eyes personally to the fact that innovation isn't just what immediately comes to mind with computers, technology, that kind of thing. It's this entire process of working with a team, creating ideas, finding ways to implement those ideas, and discussing issues that might come up and the proper ways to address those issues. It was really cool to have all of the people who work in the district come and meet with us and give their thoughts about what they do every day, working with the rest of the district, and how each different part and team would have to be applied in the process of decision making for something like the parking pass.
Katie, any reflections from you helping to lead this process?
I just think the coolest part was watching these students who had mostly they hadn't met before. I mean, the Tech students knew each other and the Apollo students knew each other, and they started off on opposite sides at their own tables. And by the end, they were intermingled and not only talking about this process, but talking about college applications and sports and everything that they were involved in. So just kind of the bringing everyone together on that common ground and working to solve a problem, which is innovation. So that'd be my reflection.
My big thing with this is I heard a speaker years ago say the most important question we can ask in education is what if? And that to me is really at the root of this whole process. Is it's small now, and this is a small group, and we're starting. You've heard me say before when we've talked about innovation and thinking differently, I've used the phrase tip of the iceberg, and that just keeps resonating. This is just tip of the iceberg. And asking that question, what if? I fully anticipate that this process, this idea will grow. Bennett and some of his classmates, I shouldn't say well, they are classmates now, they're group members, have indicated they want to continue this process. They want to keep going next year. The possibility of an actual innovation team where we start to regularly come together, grow the group, but also come together and think about other ways that we can impact this amazing district. I just think it's a pretty awesome opportunity. So now it's your turn for questions for us.
I like the way that you guys have been working together from different schools. I've heard a little bit about the plan you came up with, and it looks really nice. But I'm a finance guy. There are costs to maintaining parking lots. And I know you guys were working on the cost, and then all of a sudden they seem to disappear in your final plan. Is this $10 forever or $5 per new car sufficient to cover the costs of snow plowing and seal coating and all these other things that go into putting a parking lot together?
Sure. I'll start with that one, and then if anyone else wants to jump in. One of the things we heard was the amount that's collected currently with the parking permits is at a level that currently doesn't cover. It's not a zero-sum cost. It's not that the parking permits cover the snow plow and the maintenance and those kind of pieces. The amount that's collected is something that after Superintendent Putnam and Amy Scullerud and I believe some board members took a look at. It was a cost that it was low, the income, the revenue coming in was low enough that they felt that was replaceable in other areas, other savings. So the $5 would cover the cost of the actual sticker itself, or the $10, would cover the cost of the sticker easily. And so there's no cost of buildings, because the buildings typically would buy the permits in the past, and so that will more than cover that. So the buildings are held harmless, and Amy was pretty comfortable with the ability for us to make this change.
You still have not addressed the cost. What percent of the cost is covered by the sticker program and what percent is not?
Scott, I can take that. So we covered that at Board Finance. This does not cover any of the cost. And Board Finance said that when it went through the committee, we agreed that we were comfortable not passing that cost onto our families. And the cost is covered in the budget that you guys reviewed and that you will approve in June. So we have the full amount for all the things you mentioned: snow plowing, seal coating, the supervision or the coverage to monitor the stickers. That's all covered in our budget.
Well, I'm glad it's covered. I would assume it's going to be out of the general fund.
Yes.
How much is the cost?
We would need to get back to you. I think snow plowing this year was about $100,000. That depends on the weather. I don't know how often we seal coat. I don't know how often we replace pavers. We would need to actually, I did not know that you wanted that full accounting this evening, so we will be glad to provide that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think some of the costs, well, first of all, parking lot costs are paid for out of LTFM dollars too, so it's just one of those things. We maintain them not just for students, but for staff and for events and all of the different things that we need parking lots for. They're kind of necessary. My question is going to be around the enforcement piece of it. And I know you brought up, and rightfully so, I think you brought up a good point in that if something isn't enforced, then there's really no reason to have it. And with the sticker program, I think it's necessary to have some type of identification on cars so that we know which cars, the cars that are in the lot are the cars that are supposed to be in the lot. And we've had abandoned vehicles left in our lots and things like that we you know, this would help us to know that those don't belong to us, but what, and I'm not looking for an answer. I'm asking a question. What is a reasonable enforcement program? And is that something that would be determined through another student-led process? So that we know that the students are buying into it? You know, we can't fine, you know, $20 fines for not having a sticker, and we're gonna have kids who miss the school bus, don't normally drive to school, don't have a sticker, and take their parents' car for the day. So are we gonna have an area for temporary temporary parking where they would check in with the office and give a license plate number or something like that? I mean, some of those things need to be taken into consideration. And I know we don't have those answers yet, and that's why I say I'm not looking for an answer. I'm looking, I guess maybe I'm just looking down the road saying, what type of enforcement can we have that's reasonable, that isn't going to create more problems than it solves,
Right.
but yet has enough bite that it gives meaning to having a sticker on your car versus not having a sticker on your car.
So I would agree that that may not be this group's questions to answer. However, I'm gonna also express an appreciation because now you're expressing pain points back to us. Now you're part of the 55 minutes, and the 55 minutes starts over again. And now we get to explore those pain points and bring ideas and solutions and think through those very deeply. So I appreciate that because now you're part of us. You're part of Imagine 742. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie and Bennett, and Ryan. So my two sons drive every day to Apollo, and when my oldest son drove 2 years ago, he got a permit. And to be honest, as a single mom, $85 was a lot of money at that time of the year, so thank you for pointing that out as a pain point. And this year, he's like, I don't really, why would I get that? Nobody enforces it. And I'm like, true that. I just said that, and I'm part of the board, and I didn't encourage my son to do it because that's money, you know? So I like the idea of enforcement because I really like the idea of safety, that this is what that really comes down to. And the other thing I really appreciate is that students are like, but what is the money for? Like, give students a reason, not just like this $85 or whatever, you know, that goes to wherever. And so thanks for asking for that. I have a couple of questions. Bennett, since this is kind of a new process for us, how did the students that you worked with feel about the process and the outcome? And then do you feel like the broad student population at Apollo and Tech had their voices heard through this?
Yeah, so actually one thing we reflected just on the entire process at the end of the original 742 Imagine meeting, Ryan actually had quite a difficult time finding things that we could critique. There was just not much actually that the students had to give. We loved it. It was not only productive, but enjoyable. We all had a good time, made friends. Ethan, who was in the video, was someone that I had rarely ever seen before, and now is someone that I talk to daily, just because of 742 Imagine, a friend I made. And back to the entire school district, that was something we definitely focused on, making sure that not only the voices in the room were heard, but everyone. And we made sure to continue doing that because it is easy to lose some of those points of view. But when it was repeatedly brought up in the slides Ryan had set up, we were able to make sure that all points of view were properly addressed.
That's great. Thank you, Bennett. The other thing that I was going to say, you already answered, so way to go. Lastly, I'm going to say that this is civics, like this is democracy to me. So I know that part of the legislature's new plan is that all students, I think starting in 2028 or whatever, are going to need to graduate with civics lessons. And like what you're saying there, that all voices were heard, but then there are people in the decision room that make the decisions, and it affects a lot of people. And so thanks for being part of that process.
Hi, thank you for coming and everything. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to start with Katie. So I'm not sure that I really know what this Imagine 742 is and where did it come from? How long has it been there? And can you give me a little bit more background of what is this?
Sure. Yeah, and then Ryan might have to pop in to help me a little bit here. But so it's a program we started. I can't remember the name of the company.
I'm muting myself. Catapult Ed is the consulting company we worked with that helps us program the platform.
Yep. So it's an online platform that was linked to all students and communicated to all students, where they could log on with their Google accounts, and they kind of read the prompt of making school, the school experience better, and they were able to then submit an idea to that platform. So that was kind of how the whole thing started, was just general, what ideas do you have about making your school experience better? And students submitted lots of things from being able to listen to more music, to parking permits, to mascots, to...
Not do homework?
There might have been some homework ones there. There might have been. But the one that was the most popular, the most voted, the most invested in was the parking passes.
So that's, as I'm hearing, is available to every single student in the two schools or in where?
Every student 9 through 12. Yep.
Including McKinley?
Including McKinley.
Okay. So if McKinley students are there, I heard in your groups that there were just Apollo and Tech. You didn't have representation of McKinley students?
We didn't have McKinley students in this one because parking passes weren't used for McKinley students. So it wasn't really impacting those students at the time. And so we just included, at this point, Apollo and Tech students. I also think they were the only ones that invested and upvoted the parking pass idea.
So the way it worked, Monica, is there was about 50 students total that we call engaged in this idea. It means they took one of the chips and voted. They left comments. They introduced the idea, for example. I think we had 2 or 3 parking permit ideas that we had to merge together.
Or
that
3, yep.
Katie worked to merge. And so that's the 50 that were then invited to be part of this particular process. We wanted the kids that had shown interest in this topic to be invested in the process. Of those 50 then, we put invitations out to all 50. And we had 7 that officially said, I'm able to. Some kids just weren't able to because their classes, they had other things, they had tests going on, they just said, I can't miss. But of that 57 said, yep, we're in. And then we originally planned to meet here, but we had to move it to Tech for just a number of reasons. And we met over at Tech and met for most of the day over at Tech. So that's kind of where it whittled down from thousands of kids down to these 7 that were particularly part of the day.
So I figured that you were part of those 7. So could you tell me a little bit more? Could you tell me a little bit more about your experience being part of that group? How much time did it take you? Did you have to miss a lot of class? All those kind of little details about the experience, other than it was fabulous and great, but a little bit more details.
Yeah. So I believe I only missed, I think it was 3 or possibly 4 classes in the morning. It wasn't much. One of those just being like lunch and study hall. But yeah, we were bused over to Tech. We all met in a room with the group of kids that were there, and then Ryan, Katie, and other people from the district. And yeah, Ryan had a slideshow with most of the slides you've seen on here, and other ones just to kind of help us along the process. And yeah, we were originally divided up into the two groups of Tech and Apollo to discuss the issues that faced each school individually. And then after that, we combined together, narrowed down what affected both schools, and out of those, what was the most important, and just worked down from the problems, working like with 55 minutes for the problems, addressing all points of view, all details of it. And then we created the solution. I believe like in between there, we had some pizza, just a bit of a break in between. Yeah,
A
but
lot of pizza consumed by 7 kids, I'm just gonna say. Yeah, it was a lot.
I have another question for you. You were talking about that you were asking what the funds were for. What did you find out? What was surprising?
I think the most surprising cost was just how much it was. I think me and others figured it went towards something involving the parking lots. We learned that like the costs of snow removal, obviously being the main one, but then seal coating it, redoing the lines, the parking lot lines and arrows. But yeah, the amount it costs for snow removal, I think, was the biggest surprise. Just, yeah, especially. That was definitely shocking to all of us.
And who was asked? The 7 students, the 50, or the whole student body?
That would be the 7 of us that were at the meeting.
So that's a follow-up for my next question, because you do mention about transparency. And so we have budgets that are public. People can see our budget. We can have a line. I don't know if we have a line for snow removal, but I think that we could have a line for snow removal. And I doubt that people really go and look into the budget and just gonna find the line to find that. I doubt that there is a lot of people or a lot of students that will go and look into the budget to see how much costs to get their education. So when you said about awareness and how you become aware of things, other than being presented, being 7 of you that have opportunity to discuss that, do you discuss any ideas or do you have any propositions for that transparency or awareness, or what should we do?
Yes. So something we discussed at the meeting that I think would be helpful was like at the day in the end of August when students come in to have pictures taken, get their Chromebook and the parking pass, on the sign directing kids to the activities office, it could be listed the things that the money goes for. So right there when you see the sign, you say, oh, the money goes towards the snow removal, the seal coating, the lines, and that would be something that every student would see as they're there picking up their devices, getting their picture taken.
Oh, nice. So you pass all those suggestions to the administration? They're aware? All right. All right, but thank you so much for that. And how long have you been doing this? The Imagine 742, you said?
Okay.
This is the very first one.
Oh, great.
A question. The 2 pictures of the parking lots, and they weren't very full, were those taken during the school day? Is that typical to see?
Those were actually taken by Google Earth, to be honest with
So
you.
we
Those are
don't know.
taken off
Okay.
Google Earth and screenshot and edit and just trimmed by myself, yeah. Nothing, not an actual drone of ours or anything like that, yeah.
I'm curious, or I will be curious to know if we see more students participating in this, and then with the assumption that, it's $185? Is that what the parking fee? 85. If that was a barrier to that, if we're going to see
I'll just step in
change.
quickly, and then Bennett's got firsthand experience at one of the schools, and Katie is in both her high schools a lot, so she'll see it as well. When I go to the high schools now, I would say the parking lots are probably at least half full or half empty, I guess, how you want to look at it. And so I think there's definitely room for growth within the parking lots itself to expand if more students decide to drive and park in those locations. So, yeah. Bennett, I don't know if you, when you park, or Katie, you see the same thing?
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of room to grow. There's never been an issue me finding a spot even towards the front. There's definitely room in the parking lot.
I see the same thing. I think it will be interesting to see if more students drive. We do love a carpool and the bus for environmental reasons, but if more students can participate in activities because they're able to drive, I think that's a really big benefit. So I think that will be interesting to see, but there definitely is space in both lots when I'm visiting.
Yeah, I agree too. You know, we don't want to be encouraging everybody driving. However, there are reasons that people do that, and maybe even work or activities too. And if we had a dollar amount that was a barrier for those people to take advantage of that, that's pretty disappointing. And so I'll be curious to see if we see more people doing that, more people being able to drive. Al, and then Natalie.
I think we've done a survey. I'm looking. I think we've done a survey at the beginning of each year to see how many students are planning to drive, if they're going to commit to driving when we're doing our bus routing. Because there is an advantage to the district when students drive. There's less bus. I mean, we can eliminate a bus or something, and that's a lot of money right there also.
Yes, and in fact, it's going out. We just talked, Gary and I, we just talked about it at Cabinet, and we're going to wait until the end of the conclusion of the school year so we don't cause any confusion, but it'll go out in early June.
The survey.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And I just want to be really clear too on because Scott, I think you mentioned that it was coming out of the general fund, but it's really it's coming out of long-term facilities maintenance. And those are planned expenses, and we have discretion, or we have discretionary funding with long-term facilities maintenance, where if costs go up, we can levy for those increased costs, and if cost goes down, we can levy less based on what we're actually using. But parking lot expenses, it's one of those things that we're expected to maintain parking lots, and that's how it's funded, is through long-term facilities maintenance. So it isn't affecting classroom teachers or classroom budgets. It's affecting the long-term facilities maintenance budget.
I might also now be a part of Imagine 742 because I'm thinking about staff permits, because I'm just thinking about the safety thing in general. And, you know, thinking about like a college or even some other high schools, private high schools maybe that I've been at, where everybody is permitted. So you even know what teachers, you know, which cars are the teachers. And so if there's an issue with the car, then you know that it's not somebody in the building. So wondering if that might be a next step. I'm not saying to make teachers pay. Let's just be clear about that. But yeah, I was wondering.
Definitely a pain point we can take a look at and explore. I think we did talk about that as part of the conversation. The other part too, just to note, is the staff parking lots are usually separated or distinct from the student parking lots at Apollo. One is north side, one is south side. Tech, the students park on would be the south side, and the staff park on the west side. I'm sorry, I've got to position myself to get my west and east. And so, yeah, so there, but we had that conversation as well. That's definitely part of the discussion.
Do we still maintain or control the parking lot across the street from Apollo?
That one I
There's
can't
the
speak to
crosswalk at the
personally.
stoplight that goes over, because that, when my kids were going, that used to be, you know, the one lot was full and the overflow was across the street. And yeah.
That's the one by the VA.
Yeah.
To the best of my knowledge, no. This winter, there was an event that the parking lots at Apollo couldn't get cleared in time, and we were over in that parking lot because the VA had plowed it. So I believe that is the VA.
That's VA's, and Gary would know that.
Yes, it is our parking lot, but we currently have a lease agreement with the VA on that one.
So we don't have an option to use it then, or we do have an option to use it? It's,
We aren't using it right now, we don't have a need, it's a year-to-year use.
okay. But it's our property then?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
A little bit of a teaching moment. We just voted on a code of ethics for the school board. And built into that code of ethics is kind of a conflict. Because on one hand, we're trying to do everything we can to make our students' lives better. But on the other hand, it isn't the students that elect us, it's the taxpayer. And long-term facilities maintenance is a tax. So we're trying to always balance between what's best for our students and what's best for the people that vote for us. And it's kind of a teachable moment for you now. Thank you.
I will say, Scott, that the parking lot is used by the buses, the parents, activities. So there's so much more than just the students coming to and from. So if I'm there, my daughter takes the bus to school, but we're parking there in the evening for activities. So it's a multi-use parking lot.
It certainly is. I agree.
Anybody else? This was fantastic. Thank you. Okay, our other informational item that we have tonight is summer learning opportunities. And we have Dr. Mike Rivard, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education, and then welcome Brianne Hearn, Supervisor of Strategic Alignment and Student Success.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Haas, Dr. Putnam, members of the board. We are excited tonight to review with the school board our plans for summer programming for 2023. As Chair Haas noted, this evening Brianne Hearn, our Supervisor of Strategic Alignment and Student Success, is here with me to review the wonderful opportunities that we have planned for students for this summer.
Good evening, Chair Haas, Superintendent Putnam, and members of the board. We are excited to share the work that has been happening behind the scenes for the past 5 months to create conditions for summer learning opportunities in our district. In order to prepare for meaningful summer programming for our students, we first needed to identify our constraints and logistics to determine capacity for programs. For starters, our Buildings and Grounds team mapped out all building availability based on major projects around our district to ensure we had the necessary space to hold programming. Once we knew where we could host programming, our next step was to determine transportation routing. Our transportation team did some incredible work to ensure that we would be able to provide access for as many students as possible. Next, our health services team, led by Jessica Voss, determined availability of nursing to provide the required support for students who attend summer opportunities. Thanks to the hard work of our operational team, we were able to create conditions that will support well over 1,500 students attending summer learning. At this time, we would like to provide you with an overview of the programming that will happen in District 742 schools this summer. In our elementary schools, we will be offering a targeted services program during 2 3-week-long sessions of 60 hours per session. In each of 12 5-hour days, students will be using enrichment curriculum to support learning in the areas of reading, math, and science. Learners will utilize Scholastic Lit Camp, Lego STEM kits, and Camp Invention resources to participate in engaging hands-on learning. For our middle schoolers, we are fortunate to have a history of partnership with Cairo and the 21st Century Grant through United Way and Partners for Student Success. These programs will continue to offer services for our middle-level learners, impacting between 200 and 300 students this summer. Through these partnerships, students will be offered a variety of academic supports such as tutoring and mentorship, as well as fun activities intended to support social-emotional learning. This summer, we will once again be offering our credit recovery program for 9th through 12th graders who have lost credits during the school year. During each of 3 two-week-long sessions, students can earn up to 2 credits or 20 hours. This summer, we will invite over 400 students to each of the 3 sessions where they will be able to engage in core content credit recovery. Last summer, we had over 1,500 credits that were recovered during this program.
Thanks, Brian. We also have 2 English language newcomer summer programs for this coming summer, one for elementary and one for secondary. At the elementary, we provide an opportunity for about 15 students who have been in the United States for 2 years or less to engage in interactive speaking and writing activities with their peers in order to grow their expressive language skills. These are 3rd through 5th graders who will be able to strengthen their reading skills also by looking at books that are culturally inclusive. These students will be able to see themselves in the stories and that the perspectives that these books bring. The newcomer summer program allows students to develop stronger language skills, especially in a low-risk environment. During our secondary multi-language program, newcomers will receive integrated content and language instruction and health class. This is co-taught by a secondary health and EL teacher that's meaningful and accessible based on their English language proficiency levels. By providing this for incoming freshmen and current high school students, this is an opportunity to earn high school credit. We're giving them this proactive approach and supporting the needs of their multi-language learners from our high schools. Since many of these students are on an alternative pathway to graduation, this summer program provides them with an additional step closer to meeting their graduation requirements. And lastly, our longest running summer programming experience for students is our extended school year program. During this program, students with special education needs work on individual goals in the areas of academics, social emotional learning, and functional skills. They also are receiving related services. Those are speech, occupational therapy services, adaptive physical education. We serve approximately 400 students with special education needs over the summer. These are students all the way from early childhood up to our 18 to 21 program. Students qualify for extended school year program based on the decision of their IEP team. And this year we'll have extended school year programming at all of Corey View, Westwood, North, and Roosevelt. So that is a description of our summer school program. Again, we are excited that over 1,500 students will be experiencing summer school programming in one way, shape, or form in District 742. Is there any questions?
Monica?
We do provide transportation, right?
We do for some of the programs. For a few of the other programs like Cairo and 21st Century Learning, there's some transportation that those programs may provide. And for 21st Century at the middle school, they would also be students who would be getting there themselves.
So I think that I missed when you were explaining. Are all the programs recovered? Do all the programs help credit recovery?
The high school program is a credit recovery program, except for the special education programming for extended school year. That would be a program where students are working on their goals from their individual education plans and ensuring that they're not losing some of the gains that they had made that year on their IEPs.
And how do students participate in the summer programs?
Or
In general.
In general, there's some qualifying criteria for our students with special education needs. For the students who are EL learners, those would be students who have only maybe been in the country for 1 to 2 years, are recently arrived EL learners and our SLIFE learners. For our elementary targeted services program, I'll let Brian comment on that.
Sure, I have this on. For elementary targeted services, it's a state criteria that's very broad, so we had to determine how many students we could invite, and then we really honed in on specific reading, math, and science skills to determine which students would be invited.
But the district invite the students. It's not like a parent I can say, can I have my kid there?
Right. For targeted services, yes, we invite.
So there is targeted services for elementary school, and what else? Is there anything else?
For elementary?
Just for elementary, it would be the targeted services elementary, and then for those students who have special education needs.
Special education, okay.
And a small group of our our EL and ML learners.
That are both high school and elementary.
We have a elementary and high school program.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are any of our summer, secondary probably, credit recovery classes, are they online classes, any of them, or are they all in person?
Not that I'm aware. I believe they are all in person.
Is that something we'd be looking at in the future, is doing summer online as part of our new school?
That's definitely a possibility that can be explored. How the program is set up right now is kids are able to, it's self-paced, so they have whatever courses they need, and then there's a teacher in the room, but really the kids are working through whatever class at their own pace, so the teacher just provides support. So there definitely would be, that would definitely be something to explore, is how can we expand that to maybe virtual in the summer? Good idea.
Some of these questions, I don't know if they're even worth asking, because can a student from another district do credit recovery through our district if we were to do it online? Is that something that we could make available like statewide and get, now with summer classes, do you get the same, you wouldn't get the same funding that we would get
different
during the
funding.
normal school year, but would we get funding for it if we did?
Well, this is not my area of expertise, and Amy's not here, but it is different funding sources for credit recovery versus just like offering an online class. So I guess we would have to explore those rules. I don't know. And we have new legislation that we'll have to dig through too, because there's some loosening of that e-learning.
Can you explain the difference to me between a credit recovery class and an online class, or just a regular class?
Well, the content, I guess technically is the same, but you might have to help me here, Lori. When kids are credit deficient, we use a different funding source to support that extended time for them. That's my understanding. Is that correct? Okay. Sorry.
Yes.
Right.
They took the class, plus they're taking another class, so there's additional time being spent on that student, so that we're probably not getting the full funding on it, but we're getting partial funding for holding credit recovery courses. So, but I guess I was wondering if there was a content difference between a credit recovery class. Is it just a partial, like?
It's like the standards are still the same. The assessments, they're just set up a little different. So kids, for example, if I've gone through a class and I've understood certain parts of the standards, I don't necessarily have to repeat all of that content again. I can hone in on those things that I missed, and so I'm able to move faster and get those credits.
Natalie?
Yeah, this is the second time I've heard about this today, and it's even more exciting. This time, I love that you kept saying 1,500 students. I was like, yes. I really appreciate how We are using enrichment curriculum for elementary. It reminds me of when we kind of made the switch of how we were doing our programming for, what is the right word to use? We were talking about how students learn and seeing how students learn instead of just basing kind of the higher classes on if their test score is higher or not. And so it seems to fall in line with the way that we're thinking about learning versus here's your math book, let's go for 3 weeks, which who wants to come to that? So thanks for being innovative in that way.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
We had a nice presentation a while ago about science-based reading and I think before that math. How is that reflected in your credit recovery classes?
For the credit recovery classes, Scott, for over the summer?
Yes.
Boy, what a challenging question to think through because a lot of our letters training that we're going to be starting will be starting in October of this coming year. So while the district is beginning its embracing of the science of reading and some of the professional development that we'll be doing, our targeting over the summer of helping kids catch up for credit recovery, along with making sure that they're maintaining where they're at as they left us in May and June for our students with special education needs, and then looking for those opportunities for our newcomer students with EL and ML needs. It's a little bit different, but I think if you ask me that question in May next year, I think you might get a little bit of different answer as we go through our professional development this year.
Just a little too soon, huh?
It's always good to have us thinking about it, though.
Thank you.
Moving on to our discussion and action items, we have one action item that is the approval of a list of graduates for Apollo and Tech High Schools. Again, Kay Nelson is presenting, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education.
Thank you, Chair Haas, Superintendent Putnam, board members. It is my pleasure to present our list of 256 graduates from Apollo and 362 graduates from Tech High School, and you have those at your seats.
Okay, this is an action item, so I'm looking for a motion and a second.
I move to approve the list of graduates for the district for this year, academic year.
So moved and seconded.
Okay, so I have a motion by Monica and a second by Natalie. Any discussion at all? Scott?
Could you repeat how many from each school?
Sure. Apollo has 256 and Tech has 362.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, Zach, can you please call roll?
Monica Scares-Swartz,
Yes.
Heather Weems,
Yes.
Scott Andresen,
Yes.
Natalie Copeland,
Yes.
Elle Dahlgren,
Yes.
Zach Dorholtz, a yes, and Shannon Hotz.
Yes. Thank you. And then we have a discussion item. We have the Minnesota State High School League MSHSL report presented by Superintendent Lori Putnam.
Good evening, Chair Haas, members of the board, listening audience at home. I am glad to share the trimester 3 report to the board. The reason I am doing this instead of Assistant Superintendent Nelson is that in the shift of some of our district structure, I took back activities and as she took on the learning and teaching team. So that is why I get to do this this evening. And I do have, I think, positive news to report to this team regarding our engagement with the State High School League and Lakes Conference. I'm going to shorten that to CLC from now on, but that's what that acronym stands for, is the Central Lakes Conference. And for those of us who aren't familiar with that, it is the districts that are part of our group of who we compete against, right? So I think there's eight other districts. So that's what I'll be talking about this evening. So I have talked repeatedly and at length with Eric Martins, the director of the State High School League, and I believe that they have made significant progress toward our mutual goals of creating safe, respectful environments for all participants. And I do want to give you the examples of why I feel comfortable making that assertion this evening. Since the conversation began, I'm not, and I want to be clear that I'm not necessarily correlating, right? But since we began the conversation, that there have been steps that have been taken, and I am confident will continue to be taken. The steps that have been done are that they have a student-generated code of behavior for both students and spectators. Those are near completion, and they were developed through the past year with the listening sessions of students and staff, and mostly students. So those are going to be rolled out in August, so prior to the start of the 23-24 season. The Student Advisory and Leadership Team, which advises the State High School League Governing Board on issues such as safe and respectful competition environments, wrapped up its first year and is heading into year 2, and they are in ongoing dialogue with the State High School League Board to share their student perspective. They have a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging team, which I actually liked. I've heard DEI often. I haven't often heard the B added. I thought that was kind of cool. So the DEB team of the State High School League has revised its position statement on safe and respectful environments after receiving feedback from stakeholders this past year. It is currently up for board review. The board will vote in June, and it will be completed by August. So they'll have that new position statement ready to launch again prior to the 23-24 school year. The State High School League has committed to hold regional student meetings to continue the conversations that were begun. We did host last year, and it went really well, and so we would be glad to host again for our CLC. And others who wanted to join. And then the State High School League did revise the video that school boards have to watch, so you'll get the opportunity to see that in July. And they did it intentionally to include greater diversity and to be more inclusive of outstate districts, which was an ask that we had made. I'm sure others did also. And I do want this board to know that with the permission or the blessing of the chair and vice chair, I did agree to take part in that video. So we'll have to watch that, not just put it on the consent agenda. And then the other thing that I don't know if this is new. It is new to me. Kay may know better than I do because Kay is on the MASA board. But the State High School League has been coordinating a lot of their actions with MASA and AMSD. To make sure that the efforts that are being made at the state level are coordinated and collaborative. I know that we in this district have had concerns about, making sure that our students are competing in safe and respectful environments. So one of the things that we are focusing on in the CLC, at the reminder and the urging of the State High School League is that the bylaws exist. Right, bylaw 209 lays out the consequences for harassment. It defines it, and then it lays out what the consequences are to be, and they are just as stern as if you had a chemical violation. So they are consecutive, right? So it's 2 weeks and then 4 or 6. I don't remember off the top of my head, though it is linked here. And Al actually has it in front of him, so he can tell us exactly. But they are cumulative across the student's career. So it's not a this year and then you start over next year. It's across the seasons and across the years. So now I'm going to transition to our district and our CLC, because really, in my perspective, we have the opportunity to shape the environment that our students are competing in, right? We've got 8 partners in this work, and we have the structure, the framework for how to respond to incidences of harassment. So our team is committing as an internal 742 team and in partnership with our CLC to take action to make sure that we are providing that respectful and safe environment for all of our students and our spectators and our staff who are there. So at the last governing board meeting, we had this on the agenda, and we agreed that it will become a standing agenda item for our activities directors. They meet monthly, and then it will also be on our governing board agenda, and we meet twice yearly, and that's principals, superintendents, assistant superintendents if they exist, and ADs. So it's a very large meeting, and everybody at that table said, yes, we're in. So the next steps that we agree to is that using the tools that the State High School League provides and tools that we develop to meet our specific needs in this community, our communities, we will engage and train our students, coaches, ADs, and administrators in preventing and addressing harassment and ensuring positive sportsmanship beginning in August. So we'll do that in August and then throughout the year. Our ADs are currently discussing next steps from how we're going to make sure that our students, staff, and families have that respectful environment in addition to the training. You know, some of the things that we're talking about are, or will be talking about are, you know, do we want a reporting mechanism that's shared amongst the CLC? Don't we? What do we want to, what do we want to look, what does it look like? When an incident of harm has happened, do we want to use the restorative practices, right? Who is going to be involved? And so those are the steps that our team is taking as we decide how do we want to work collaboratively and together in our specific communities. And then we have also committed to just providing additional opportunities across our CLC for students and staff to mix and to build relationships so that the first time we see each other isn't, you know, necessarily when we're in the heat of competition. We did a soccer jamboree. We were talking about doing a picnic or something, you know, kind of low stakes. Now that's all fall weather. I don't know what we'll do in the winter, but those are all nice weather kinds of activities. It's not even spring activity, I promise you. I sat outside at a tennis court, and no, that's a May activity. So as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you to this board for your sincere and deep engagement in making sure that our students have the environment that they deserve, and that our families who are coming and are really clear about what we stand for and what we expect. And to our students and staff who came here, who are part of the ongoing conversations, and who are the ones who, you know, have to be able to have the courage to say to their friend, knock it off, or our staff have to say to the adult that that's not okay behavior, right? I want to say thank you to those folks as well. And to our CLC members, they are genuinely interested in engaging with us. And it's you know, sometimes when we're talking about issues of race or culture or gender or sexuality, right, those protected classes, you know, there are other protected classes, but not, you know, age isn't necessarily one that we're typically talking about for athletics but, you know, sometimes those are hard conversations. They're awkward conversations. And so you know, and a lot of our districts, our member districts, don't regularly need to engage in those conversations because they don't, you know, certainly it's just not necessarily always at the forefront of their experiences. And so I am grateful for their willingness to say, we want our students too. We want to be safe and respectful. We want your students to be safe and respectful, no matter how they may identify. So I'm really grateful for that. And our Eric has, has been straightforward, and when we asked him to come, he came. And when I say, Eric, I need to talk to you, he calls. And so I appreciate his partnership as well. And I agree we all have work to continue to do, but I believe that they have made steps, and I know that we are making steps to change the experience for our students. I wanted to offer a recommendation to this board moving forward, that we would have our ADs actually come do a report at the end of each season. And this conversation could certainly be part of it, right? If you want to know we certainly will track our 209 violations, and if you want to know that data, but I think also just knowing participation and how did we do, and what are your hopes, what are your dreams, what's next on the horizon, so that you guys, instead of just hearing once a year, kind of a dump of data and information, that you have the opportunity to engage in this really important and meaningful experience in our students' lives. So that would be my recommendation. Our ADs are all on board for that, and I am glad to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Questions, Heather, and then Monica, and then Natalie?
Maybe a couple. And looking at 209, it does give standards in terms of penalties and that sort of thing. Are those minimum standards, or are they? How does MSHSL view those first, second, third violation sorts of standards?
I'm going to do my best, right? Activities is not my area of expertise. My understanding is that those are the expectation. Just like if you're caught chemical, right? The chemical violation is the one that for me is the most closely equivalent, right? So the first offense is 2 weeks, or there's like consecutive days or games. But I don't think they're minimum. I think it is just the expectation, and then they accumulate over time.
And probably the reason that I ask or point that out is, and from experience, these sorts of events, and particularly ones that are particularly egregious, get a ton of attention. So for instance, if there were some sort of sexual harassment, if there were some sort of hazing that included physical violence sorts of things, which we hear about in the paper or in the news, all too often, unfortunately, a 2-week suspension probably is not sufficient. I mean, you're talking potentially criminal charges and those sorts of things. So I was just trying to understand the context of it. So I think just my recommendation would simply be that your team of activities directors is at least on the same page about, and probably your communications folks as well, about how you would manage some of those things, because they may or may not seem to be enough to the public when they come out.
Thanks, Heather.
Yep. Second, just maybe request is that I love the idea of getting a report from the activities directors. Part of that I would love to see is participation trends. What are we seeing? Are they going up or down? What can we do to increase? And partly whether it's theater or music or athletics or, academic sorts of things, being able to think about that and how we support, in the world of higher education, we talk about it as high impact practices. They're all places where where students find belonging. They're all places where they get opportunities to learn soft skills, teamwork, working with other people, conflict, time management, all of those sorts of things. And if we're seeing declines or if we're seeing increases, I guess my experience would say a lot of times when you see increases, it's because you have a phenomenal leader in that place, and certainly to pass along our congratulations to them as well and appreciation.
Monica?
Thank you. So I just wanted to thank you for talking to him and to taking the initiative, and just thanking the district for just doing this work and getting behind the students. I think that, I hope the students feel more supported this way. And I don't know if they have expressed that to you, but I hope that's the case. I have something else, but I forgot. But thank you.
Natalie? And then Al.
Yeah, this is great to hear. The next steps here, I really appreciate the fact, MSHSL is one thing, but CLC is another thing to me, because that's who we're going to play and who not only we're going to play, but who, when I went to, where did we even go over, Corey, maybe? For the CLC All Conference Band, Choir, and Orchestra, those sort of things I think need to be thought of as well when it comes to DEIB, or what I just heard last week was JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which I'm like, that is super awesome. I'm gonna use that one with my lightsabers and everything. But seeing it through a lens of our district, which is so different from the rest of the districts, the choir sang 2 songs that were based in Christianity. And that's totally normal for other CLC districts and not for us. And so it's just some of those lenses that we have that we think about, we've thought about for decades now, that they don't have. And to be able to talk through that, the choices for, one-act plays and things of that nature too, it goes, I think, even further down into, if we want kids to be participating, and if we want them to participate across CLC, how are we making sure that everyone has that belonging? And really working together as CLC is going to be healing for all of central Minnesota. So, it's like, this is where schools and hospitals are where community meets and has joys and issues, especially at the beginning of growing diversity. And I know we can lead in this way because we've been through issues and we've found some of our footing and we continue to learn. So thanks for being there. And I know it's more heavy lifting on our part, and rightly so, because we had the opportunities to learn where some necessarily haven't. So yeah, thanks, Lori.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear some of the changes that are taking place. It's great to hear that the Minnesota State High School League is willing to put some dates on some things. Now we need to make sure that we hold their feet to the fire. They've put dates on things in the past and not completed them on time, or not completed them at all. And I think that we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit. I think we did the right thing in writing the resolution and presenting it to the State High School League. I think it did get their attention. I think it got Eric's attention. I say that because he has paid attention to our district. He has paid attention to, I think he's paid more attention to outstate than he has had in the past. Him coming up here was a sign that he's listening and he's concerned and answering calls, and inviting you to be a part of the video is also a reflection that I think he understands what we're asking, and he's willing to have us participate to make sure that that happens, and looks to us as somewhat of a leader in setting that direction. I hope, and I know you mentioned that they're remaking the video and they're going to include much more diversity. I'm hoping also in there that they include other activities, not just football and baseball and tennis and the real visible ones, but also include some of the non-sporting activities, and include somewhere in there, I would like to see some film or inclusion of some adaptive sports, because that's part of it, and it's part of the whole family, and it needs to be included in there. So if you can pass that on to him. 209, Yeah, I read it today. To me, it's a hazing policy more than anything, I think, in there. It really gets into hazing. It's really just the very beginning that talks about racial, religious harassment, sexual, racial, religious harassment, and hazing violations. And then it talks a little bit about the violations and what the penalties are, and then it goes into a long deal on hazing and sexual harassment. And in the back portion of the policy or the bylaw, it kind of overwrites some of the, because they'll mention in the beginning here, it's first violation, second violation, third violation. But then you go back in here and it's when it's talking about sexual harassment, it's, first violation of sexual harassment or second. And so it doesn't apply equally for that type of thing. The way that I read it anyway, and I mean, it's a long document with a lot of words. But I would like to see that a little bit more clear, and I agree with Heather that it should be minimum the student shall lose eligibility for the next 2 consecutive, but not setting it as this is the penalty, because you're right, you get into some of those violations, and especially if it's their second violation for it or their third violation for it, and they're missing 6 games or 8 games, that's just not cool. So I think that I'm hoping that they take this and have another look at it, but I think it's been there for a while and probably needs some revisions. So that's it, I think, but it's a positive overall. And with CLC, I agree. We just need to talk more. I think a lot of the districts that we play they aren't represented the same way that we're represented, and they don't understand. They don't have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. But the fact that we're going to be talking about it with them at every meeting, that's huge, because it's going to put it on there. Whether they have anything to contribute or not, they're going to hear something, which is that's a win for us.
Yeah. It absolutely is. And I will pass on that feedback if you would like about 209. Would you like me to pass that back to Eric?
Yeah, let me look at it a little bit closer.
Okay. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Heather?
I think one other thing from an earlier presentation, to tie the penalties or the consequences back to the conscious discipline and restorative practices that you have, I think is really important. Because part of what we talked about during that discussion was, in an educational environment, how do we restore people, as opposed to just things being about cancel culture, let's get rid of them, or so to speak. So I think that you already have a framework, or at least District 742 does. I can't speak to other schools, but there's a framework by which I think it's really important to tie those two things.
Okay. Any other comments? We're good? Thank you. Then Superintendent's report. Lori Putnam, Superintendent, will be presenting of 742 schools.
Oh my gosh. There, I have my notes. Thank you. Good evening again. Thank you for the kind pause. I wanted to just talk a little bit about a couple of the things that I think are really exciting and happening as we begin to wrap up the year. One of them is tied to a conversation that we had earlier around the Imagine 742 campaign. Our SCEA, our teachers union, asked us if we would please have a listening session between principals, some principal representation, teacher representation, and district representation. And one of the thing they wanted to talk about was student behavior. And I was so pleased that the conversations that we were having were around students not going to class or disrespectful language. Now, in no way do I want to say that I'm endorsing that, but that's a very marked different conversation than we could have been having 5 years ago or even a couple years ago as we were returning from the pandemic. And we saw some of the behaviors that we were talking about then were safety related and physical aggression, and now we're talking about the kinds of things that are that we can, we can easily get our arms around this. And so what we agreed to as a team was that we would use our Imagine 742 platform, this format that we've already established and that we've used, to ask our staff and our students, we're going to naming these problems, right? These are our big concerns. Give us an idea. What do we need to do to support our students getting to class on time and to support our students treating everybody with respect, and it was framed around all of us, right? We all play a part in shaping behavior. So not just on students, not just on teachers, not just on principals. This is a collective conversation. And so that those have been out. I think it's been out for a little over a week, and we've had some really nice engagement across both student and staff platforms. And so now people will get their tokens at the start, I think, of next week. And so then they'll start to be able to upvote using their tokens. And then our students will be engaged in a process. Now, the students won't get to be engaged until they return, but our staff will get to be engaged following the school year. And we do have some funds that we've identified to be able to really dig in with staff and be able to reflect on what staff said and what students said about what is it that's preventing us, what's going to help us follow these expectations. What can we all do collectively to take a step in? So I'm really excited about that's our problem, right? That's a great problem to have. It's a very typical problem to have, right? In May, particularly. And so I'm confident that we can all, when we put our heads and our hearts together, that we can all make headway on that conversation. And then the other thing I want to share is that we just had a kickoff this past week. I think it was yesterday afternoon. We showed the documentary Right to Read. It's a documentary that was put together that really frames literacy as a civil rights issue. All of our students deserve to know how to read, to be literate at young ages. And we had community partners there. We had teachers and staff and administrators there. Some of our sponsors or our partners in the community gave us some popcorn and fruit and water. And it was a really powerful opportunity to kick off this commitment, following what you heard around the science of reading, that we are going to make a shift in our literacy outcomes for our students, and to see the excitement and the passion of the folks who are there, and to hear great feedback from our staff, to say we're really grateful to be all in on this effort, and to know that you're going to provide us with the tools and the time to do so, was just a really exciting opportunity. So I wanted to share that with this team. If you get a chance, it's a great documentary. I know Al got to watch it. I think it's streaming free occasionally. So if you're interested, I can try to get you a link to that. So that concludes my superintendent report. Thank you.
Thank you. Then moving on to our Board of Education Standing Committee reports. Achievement, Integration, and Equity Committee, Chair Natalie Copeland. Do you have a report?
Yes, we met today, and it was about summer programming. The end.
All right. And then Personnel Negotiations Committee, Monica Seeger Schwartz.
Well, mine's longer. So we met yesterday, and the full committee was there. So we reviewed the documents relating to superintendent evaluation process in preparation for annual review. We also review a snapshot of open positions for 23-24 school year and discuss recruitment efforts that are underway right now. And we began discussion regarding the 2023-2025 collective bargaining process and propose a schedule for a closed session that we have, I think, that scheduled already for June 22nd.
Okay, thank you. Then we have our future agenda items. June board meeting and work session topics will include Approval of student parking fees, assessment plan update, student and family handbook discussions about personal electronic devices, consideration of future referendum, schools update, end of year celebrations, and policy readings. And at this time, does any board member want to suggest a future agenda item? All right, that is, oh, nope, I can't say that. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn our board meeting. I have a motion by Natalie and a second by Scott. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Would be everybody wants to go home. So now it is 8:06 p.m. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you for watching, and we will be back June 7th. Have a good night.